Salt and light are metaphors that Jesus often uses to commend the church and all of its members to have a purpose in the world. We are supposed to be useful, to be salt, with the aim of bringing and building God's reign here on earth. Frederick Buechner and his definition of purpose, which you will find on the back of your order of worship. For some reason, I think his name got left out of that quote, but that is who it's from, Frederick Buechner, has a wonderful definition of purpose in the language of vocation, which many of us in the world of church deeply appreciate. This vocation is where your deep gladness meets the world's deep hunger. A definition that demands that we be aware of the world around us. Today is the second in a series of sermons entitled How to Be Happy. Last week we talked about connection. This week about purpose. Now, people who study these kinds of things tell us that the modern emphasis on raising children and attending to our own happiness is just that. Quite modern. For years, people spent more time raising their children or thinking about themselves in terms of how it was that they were useful or moral or contributing to society. And I wonder that there may be some interesting correlation here between this constant message and focus on happiness and the amount of struggle that we are having with mental health and depression issues in our culture right now. Being happy is like a speck in the eye. Whenever you try to focus on it, it just kind of keeps moving away. So ironically, it may be that the way to be happy is to not think about being happy at all. We parents and grandparents who constantly look at our children wondering if they are happy may be more effective as parents and grandparents if we inquire instead about whether they are feeling efficacious, engaged, even accountable in the world and to the communities they belong to. Do they feel like they have a sense of purpose? Do we feel like we have a sense of purpose? Do they feel connected to the world and like we are contributing? Greg and I have friends who struggled with a child for a long time. There were mental health challenges, some challenges maybe veering towards addiction. Some might just put it under the category of failure to launch. And for the longest time, these loving parents supported this kid. Now, we saw these parents this summer and asked about this child's well-being, and we were told that this child is doing very well now. What shifted? I asked the father. He said, we stopped fixing things. Instead, we gave a bunch of phone numbers to our child and told them to reach out and left that child alone. And now this adult child has a job. This child has taken pleasure in that job and has even decided that it's time to buy a house to invest in the place where this one is living. Now, I don't know if this person would call him or herself happy, but it sure has all the markers of that as this young one becomes an adult and is engaging in the world in a useful way and feeling efficacious. Sigmund Freud talked about two things that people need to do to work out in order to be fully actualized human beings. Just two things: love and work. Love and work. If you can figure out those two things, then you probably are doing okay in the world. If you can figure out who you love and how you are attached to people, just think of last week's sermon, those connections, and then figure some meaningful work for yourself, then you can live a good life. Vocation is that word we use in the church for finding purpose, and yes, it does have a religious connotation, as in being called, to be called forth to something in particular. And for those of us who are happy in our work, that sense of call is an essential part of it. Whether that call is creating beautiful parties, or caring for artifacts, or making sure that other people are well insured, or plowing people's driveways, or supplying their lobsters. I recently listened to a podcast that talked about a study of people who work as janitors in hospitals. Those who were most happy knew that their work was not about keeping the floors clean and the bathrooms sanitary. Rather, they saw their jobs as keeping patients safe and comfortable so that they could heal. A slight shift, but so meaningful in the way these people experienced their own work. One janitor, for instance, talked about trying to clean all the rooms as quickly as possible while paying attention to the person who was in that room. Were there signs that visitors were coming? Did they look like they were in pain? Was there any evidence of health struggles? And when this person's tasks were over, the rooms were all clean, this janitor went back to those rooms where people might need a little support or attention and checked back in, moved a water glass closer, asked how they were feeling, commented on cards or flowers in the space. One set of people not so happy with their jobs were just going through the motions. The other saw how what they did contributed to the well-being of the world. We can all sense it, right? When we work with other people, when we encounter them. There's the town clerk that just stamps things off for you and records what's needed and takes your check and off you go on your way. And then there's the one that looks at you and asks how your winter has been and wonders whether it's the year you need a new dump sticker and asks how your brother is doing. And I'm not talking about an abstraction here. I'm talking about the town clerk in Center Harbor, New Hampshire, where my family camp is, and that's the conversation I have with her every year. It's a joy to see her when I go to register our boats. So for those of us who are homemakers or past the working years, you may wonder what vocation means for you. Well, I would say that happy people continue to live with a sense of purpose, whether that's some joyful endeavor that they take on, art, playing golf with friends, learning through a book club, volunteering at community outreach services, or any other such endeavor. Here, my father-in-law was such an example. though he retired at a relatively young age, when he moved to York, Maine, he paid attention to the fact that it was not a diverse community, and there had been several anti-Semitic incidents. And so he started the York Diversity Forum and ran it for some 10 years, a program that provided enrichment and educational programs to the community, and then over time expanded to work with seasonal workers who came from other countries who needed some support. And then when that season was over, he started mentoring the very doctors who were taking care of him. He himself was a doctor, but as he was being taken care of with his health challenges, he actually found a way to pay attention to the doctors who were caring for him. The testimony to this is that one of his doctors actually showed up and gave a eulogy at his memorial service and spoke to just that kind of attentive care. It is never too late to think about how we can be useful in the world, how it is that we can bring our deepest joy to the needs of this world. So this sermon is about how to be happy, but I'll also note that some translations of the Beatitudes use the word happy in place of the word blessed. Instead of blessed are the people who, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are, they say happy are those who mourn, happy are those who struggle for justice and righteousness, implying somehow that blessing and happiness are linked. And aren't they? Isn't it true that we are happiest when we are able to participate in the world in ways that are useful, that are valuable to others and useful to God? Isn't it true that we find blessing when we are bringing blessings to others, and where we discover God's Spirit dwelling in an ongoing way in the work we do and the world we serve? Which brings me back to this question of whether we might find language with our children and grandchildren to ask not, are you happy? Which again may not be useful, but rather to wonder with them about how they are blessed, how they are being a blessing, how they are living a blessing for others. How to be happy? Well, be salt. Be salt. Do something useful and effective in the world. Contribute flavor and beauty. Add to the security and safety of others. Provide for the well-being of the world. Live your purpose. Live salty and blessed. Live blessing. Be blessed. And bless others. Happy and blessed.